Hello, welcome to a Tuesday, March 8th, 2022 edition of BlindEyeLive. I'm your host, Blind Eye himself, Hunter King, owner and proprietor of Blind Eye Media. And this is BlindEyeLive, a late, borderline primetime edition of BlindEyeLive, if I might add. Had some stuff to do this afternoon, but we are live now. I have just realized that my last few streams have had similar titles because when I would go back on Streamlabs because I would get hit with title invalid, I wasn't noticing that it was resetting my title to the last one that worked. And so I've had the same title for my last couple streams maybe. And that may have happened more times in the past, so I'm going to pay a little more attention to that. I think I was using too many caps at times, which is weird, because I don't think I was using too many words or characters. Anyway, welcome to the show. Big headline, big trade. Russell Wilson is a Denver Bronco. We'll get into that. Implications for both Denver and Seattle. Aaron Rodgers and Davante Adams are staying with the Packers. We do not know the details of the contract Rodgers signed in Green Bay. And Davante Adams has been franchise tagged by the team. The longer this process has gone on, the more clear it seemed that Aaron Rodgers wasn't going to leave. And this has been the biggest stumbling block for me. While I believed he was going to be a Packer, believed he was going to be a Bronco, because I thought Denver was just going to go full court press. Apparently the Packers have really anteed up. And apparently Rodgers is comfortable with what has happened there. And to me, it very much seemed like the only issue was between him and management. He loved the coaching staff. He has no issues with Matt LaFleur whatsoever. And I think from a football perspective, it was going to be really hard to say that he had a better shot at winning a Super Bowl anywhere other than where he was at. That could go get him. You could make some arguments for Denver or even Washington. Among to me were the two main teams that just made sense, because I didn't see how it was going to work getting him to Pittsburgh or some people have been throwing Tampa Bay out for all the big quarterbacks. I only saw it realistic that maybe Deshaun Watson ends up in Tampa Bay. And Marcus Whitman's probably going to have some fun. He just put out, Marcus Whitman, that franchise guy, just put out his mock draft 3.0. And goodness knows, he had the Texans trading Deshaun Watson to Denver. So this is big. Seattle, obviously this is going to be full rebuild mode for them. But so dominoes falling. So the top two quarterbacks for most people on the market, Deshaun Watson, I'd take him over Russell Wilson. And if we're talking long term, he's probably a better option than both from a football standpoint. Of course, there's the off-field stuff there. Well, Wilson and Rodgers are now both off the market. We know what it's like. It's done. What happens with Watson? Seattle, and I guess we'll get into that when we get into that segment. I had some other things I want to talk about as well, because today was franchise tag deadline day. And I will go through all of the guys who tags were used on and weren't. Kind of a shock from what I've been hearing out of Mike Fisher, or had heard a little while back. It's hard to listen to every beat writer for every team every day. But with but I'm working on trying to aggregate things because they're all on different platforms putting stuff. I wish more people were like Mike Fisher and who is it? The Dallas Morning News, Dallas Morning Star, Dallas Star. I'm trying to remember the paper that he works for in Dallas, but I wish there were more people like Mike who were using YouTube the way he uses YouTube. Um, Particularly, I know they have like their site, but man, I wish Outkick and some of the people that they now have as they're expanding. Like, I wish Paul Kaharski of who covers the Titans, which he has his own paywalled site. I wish he used YouTube as well. Unless he started and I just have missed it, but Mike Fisher's a great resource. But he had been saying that he believed Randy Gregory was getting franchise tag. Cowboys, their biggest priority was Randy Gregory. Well, they franchise tagged Dalton Schultz. And they've asked, so there was some restructuring today, and we're going to get to that too. So we'll talk about the moves Dallas has made today. I'm mentioning it now, but they did franchise tag Dalton Schultz. Depending on how long I go on everything else today, we'll have my offensive half of the combine. We'll look at that at the end of the show. I have a feeling, though, I'm just going to push that, and I'm going to do that tomorrow as it just the main part of the Wednesday stream. And then there was something today that some person was hollering at me about on social media that I got into a back and forth. And then they deleted everything. So I deleted all my responses. But there was something supposedly important about the day, and I don't know what it is. I cannot remember. So I guess I won't talk about it because it obviously doesn't matter. Anyway. So yeah, so let's get into Russell Wilson going to the Denver Broncos. So the trade for everyone, Denver is getting 2 first-round picks, 2 second-round, Denver. Denver is sending to Seattle 2 first-round picks, 2 second-round picks, a 5th-round pick, tight end Noah Fant, who, if he had not gotten hurt last year, I guarantee you would have finished in the top 5 in pretty much every category at tight end last year. Defensive lineman Shelby Harris, who is a solid starting interior D lineman. That is going to help Seattle's defense. And Drew Lock, which, at worst, Seattle has a guy who has some starting experience and maybe still has some upside. He's definitely someone who can utilize DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, and Noah Fant down the field. He has the arm to do it. And if there's one part of his game where he does have some consistent accuracy in comparison, it's his deep ball. His deep ball is the best part about his game. And he's more athletic than people thought. He's got really good mobility. He's got Patrick Mahomes type mobility. So, and honestly, he's got Patrick Mahomes type arm strength. I'm not going to say overall arm talent because Locke doesn't have he's nowhere near the kind of multiple arm angle, baseball sling it type arm talent that Mahomes does, but he's got a great arm. But this gives Seattle tons of options. Because right now, they could move for Deshaun Watson. The Texans have Davis Mills there. Young, looked fine. Watson wanted out. If I'm Houston, to be honest, at this point, I'd just move on. I'd start over completely. I'd get his contract off my books if I could. Take back Drew Lock, whatever. And picks. Because this gives Seattle, which Seattle didn't have a first-round pick in this draft. Now they have the 9th pick. This would give Seattle the ammunition to do something like that. Or just stay there. Roll with Locke. See what your team's like. Really, if I'm Seattle, and they have pieces. Develop pieces, but you now have the 9th pick in the draft. And when you look at their need, or like their big needs, nine's not a bad spot to be in from a corner perspective. I'm not in love with Derek. I've gone back the last few days. I know and I think I touched on him yesterday, but Derek Stingley's tape from 2020 and 2021, and particularly like early this season, despite the fact he was kind of hurting and he eventually shut it down. In that UCLA game, Stingley only gave up one big play in 3 games. And it was a slant route, but his coverage was fine on the play. It was a really great throw, for everything. Stingley did miss the tackle. But we've seen on tape that Stingley can be a really good tackler. Even the best make mistakes. Even the best give up some big plays every so often. And all accounts are Stingley is preparing for his pro day. He's going to work out heavily at his pro day. He wanted to give it a few more weeks. He wanted to make sure he was as close to 100% as he could. He has 2 opportunities to work out. And sure, pro days aren't quite as official as the combine. Everybody wants this or that. But I'm seeing a lot of guys in the class are waiting for their pro days to do some of these times and jumps. And I think it's because of how the combine's structured at the moment. Guys don't like that there's some stuff before and after position drills. So, and in saying that, you've got Stingley, who could very well be on the board at 9. Sauce Gardner could be on the board at 9. To be honest, pardon me. If I'm being completely honest, and also my chair's squeaky. If I'm being completely honest, I think at least one of Gardner or Stingley should be on the board at 9. Should. Even if not, Trent McDuffie's right there, and I like McDuffie a lot. I don't know if he's a top 10 guy. Otherwise, I know they've used a lot of second-round picks on edge guys in recent drafts. But this is a really good edge class. If there's one position I really, really feel like the sweet spot is right here, it should be the edge rushers. I don't know how many are going to be off the board by that point. But they're going to have their choice they're going to have several options there out of a group of Trevon Walker, Kayvon Thibodeau, Jermaine Johnson, David Ajabo. And honestly, I'm kind of interested in what kind of defensive front they're going to run. Their defensive coordinator and D-line coach are coming over from the Chicago Bears, who, if there's one thing that has been good there the entire time those guys were there, it's been that defensive front 7. They have some pieces. You've got Poona Ford there, really good, like, interior, like, undersized interior pass rusher type guy, penetrator. You've got Dallas Taylor, who, no, sorry, Dallas. Oh man, if Dallas Taylor was watching right now, that's a buddy of mine. No, if how am I blanking on my man's name out of Tennessee? Um, Starts with a D, but Taylor out of University of Tennessee, who they drafted in the second round in 2020. He showed real improvement last year. I have belief in him. Travon Walker would be a great fit for like the opposite side. Taylor is very much a downhill pass rushing type. If we're going in the kind of like the way Seattle has liked to play defense under Pete Carroll, they like having kind of a bigger inside outside level guy like Travon Walker, who's really good against the run on the other side. Walker has immense upside, and I think this defensive coordinator D-line coach tandem that's coming in has the ability to get the most out of him, because one thing Chicago's been developing has been like kind of no-name guys. They've been or helping great players become even better. Akeem Hicks has been awesome in Chicago. I'm trying to. There's so many different guys like it's like, was it Roy Robertson Harris? Who's another guy that they developed into and got just a ton out of. Who's a late round guy? Bilal Nichols, who they got a ton out of. I saw on ESPN, I'm trying to remember who it was, did like an overrated and underrated every position, had him as one of the overrated guys. In which case, that would be a testament to the coaching staff. So, there's not, there, while I wouldn't mind Devontae Wyatt going 9 in this draft, because I think Wyatt is awesome, I don't think he's going to go that high. And Seattle has shown a propensity for trading down. They need picks. There's no problem with them trading down from 9, because there's so many edge rushers that should go in this first round. Like, so many talented guys. And part of it is there's a really flat, there's not a whole lot of gap between, like, I'd argue, and this might sound crazy, but compared to most years, there's not as big a gap between 10 and 50. A lot of people are saying this isn't the most top-heavy draft. Maybe not. I don't know. I'm looking at the physical traits and some of the production of guys, and I'm like, I don't really understand what y'all are talking about. There not being like these blue-chip prospects. Maybe it's because I'm not as experienced as other people at doing this, although I've been watching football my entire life. I've been nerding out over football for pretty much my entire life as well. Like, I'm not a professional scout, but I'm listening to people who, I mean, yeah, they make money on YouTube talking about this stuff, and they love football just as much as I do and study, but I don't necessarily agree with Marcus Whitman about some of the blue chip stuff. Because I look at Devontae Wyatt's tape, I look at the athleticism he just showed, and I'm like, to me, that's a blue chip interior defensive lineman. Evan Neal, we've got 3 blue chip left tackles, or at the very least, Ike Mekwonu is a blue chip left tackle prospect and a Hall of Fame level prospect at guard. Evan Neal is a elite blue chip prospect. Charles Cross is a blue chip left tackle prospect. People can have questions about the run game all you want. He played at Mississippi State under Mike Leach. I'm gonna say that the run game just isn't as big a priority in that system. It's not that he can't, and he can't be nasty in it, because there are moments like him on screens or when they have run the ball and done some like counter stuff or got him out on the move. He's a nasty blocker in space. Trust me, Cross is And Cross is still developing. He's the best pass protector in this draft, and he's not even at his peak yet. This guy, when he came to Mississippi State as a true freshman, was 260. This was his redshirt sophomore year. He was 3.0, and he comes into the combine at a really nice looking 3.07. He could still put weight on. He could still put strength on. And he is a mere master at left, or as a left tackle prospect. Super polished. And that's the thing for Seattle. Dwayne Brown's a free agent. I'm going to say all three of those left tackles are off the board. Seattle could be in position at 9. But they could trade back. I mean, getting back in these edge rush guys or interior guys. Maybe they want an Eddie Goldman type. Well, there's Jordan Davis. Or, you wait till the second round. You use that second round pick on Travis Jones if he doesn't sneak into the back end of the first round. Oh, sorry. So, yeah. But like I was talking about yesterday, Aiden Hutchinson, he'll be off the board. 1 or 2 of Trayvon Walker, Jermaine Johnson, Kayvon Thibodeau could be off the board by 9 as well. But you're still someone out of that 3. David Ojabo, Boye Mafe, Arnold Ebiketie. If you trade down. There's another guy. Maybe George Karlaftis. I don't agree. Another guy I don't agree on necessarily with Marcus Whitman. I don't think Karlaftis' tape is as consistent as he thinks or as he believes. And I like Karlaftis, but it's like I love a lot of these other guys. And I would take them ahead of Karlaftis. But it also depends on what you want. Once again, this guy kind of fits that inside or that outside-inside kind of guy that the Seahawks have really liked. Karlaftis kind of looks like like the guys that the Bills have drafted in recent years. So there's that. But dadgummit, who's the other guy that I'm blanking on right now on the edge that I really liked in the first round mix? I had Walker, Thibodeau, Johnson, Mafe, Ebiketie, Ojabo. Maybe that's the other 6. Or maybe that is it. That might be it. But the Seahawks are in position to potentially go after one of those guys. They're in position, if they want to draft one of the quarterbacks at 9 or trade down and draft one. And having Drew Lock there, is he an awesome option? No. But if you want to take the high upside guy in Malik Willis and let him sit, and you believe in Willis, take Willis at 9. Or take Sam Howell at 9. Because I'm ready to pound the table and say Howell is QB number 1 for me at this point. I believe in the tools, and I believe in his first 2 seasons as a starter. And I believe in what I'm seeing in year 3 with Sam Howell. And we'll get into this tomorrow when I do my combine stuff, because I am going to stream tomorrow afternoon. I don't understand how anyone can look at Sam Howell, who thought he was a top 10 quarterback coming into the year, and say, with the situation he was in, when you take out his top 2 receivers, and I think 3 of his top 4, when you completely change the offensive system, his protection on the line, despite the fact that I still really love Turner off that line, the line play was worse last year, and I think a lot of that had to do with the change in scheme and stuff. It took him a while to get used to his new running backs. Ty Chandler ended up making really good, but you lost Williams and Carter out of that backfield, and his tight end played worse this year. It's really weird. Like, that guy just had some passes that he dropped that he just didn't drop those the years or before 2021. Just some strange stuff. Howell's tape is great. He's not that far off from Malik Willis when it comes to athleticism. He's not quite as fast. He is fast. He's got real, playmaking ability with the ball in his hands. Unlike Malik Willis, when he rolls out, he's not rolling. When he takes off outside the pocket, Willis is looking to run. He rarely has his eyes up downfield. He rarely is looking for a receiver down the field when he rolls out. Howell is much more tape of him going through progressions. Howell is not afraid to throw over the middle field. In fact, he's really good in the RPO game, throwing over the middle. That's one of the weird things about Liberty's offense. You had a guy in Willis who you'd think they would be killing it in the RPO game and hitting in the quick game. Willis was averse to throwing over the middle of the field. There is so many times on tape where there's a wide open guy running up the seam or running on a post, and he sees him. You could see him look at him, and then he just doesn't pull the trigger. He just is not confident. And then there are other times where the guy's open and he just misses him. He never looks for him. Never looks in the middle of the field. And you might blame some of that on the offense. You might blame some of that on Hugh Freeze. He seemed to be in love with 4 curls concepts. And I'll tell you, those kind of spacing concepts, there's certain situations where I'm like, okay, but I'm not a huge fan. I don't like having all my receivers just quick stop. I want someone to be moving. There needs to be some movement laterally on the play. Not everybody needs to run 10 to even 15 yard. He'll have a play and it's everybody's running 8 to 15 yard curl routes. It's just bizarre. But that could have been because of Willis. Willis's horizontal accuracy is bad. He's not, or I say bad, he's very inconsistent hitting receivers who are moving perpendicular to him. But guys running away from him parallel down the field, linear targeting, he's great. And he's really good at throwing outside the numbers, although sometimes he stares things down too long and he makes some really bad decisions. And sometimes he's late making those throws. But he won't throw over the middle of the field. Sam Howell will. And Sam Howell played against consistently tougher competition. And I think it's telling that his worst season statistically came with his worst supporting cast. And not only worst supporting cast, but worst surrounding structure in general. Because the playbook was not the same. That offense did not look the same. And some of that's attributed to personnel too. And he did have one really good receiver. I'm trying to remember the guy's name. Was it Downs? Who's a much better version of Daz Newsome, in my opinion, or a more explosive version of Daz Newsome. So, Howell is my QB1. Howell is my QB1. I'm moving him ahead of. How am I blanking on the guy's name right now? Kenny Pickett. I was wanting to say Ryan Pickett. I'm like, it's not Ryan Pickett. Kenny Pickett. Pickett has great tape. There are a lot of people saying the 8.5-inch hands don't matter. I will say this. Joe Burrow measured in the 8th percentile in hand size in NFL Combine history when he came into the league. So, But Kenny Pickett's hands are like I said, really small. They're some of the smallest of any quarterback ever. So that can very well be an issue. Mel Kiper doesn't think it will be. But if you're looking at the tape's super good for Pickett. Yeah, he's got some things to clean up, but those are things we've seen other quarterbacks clean up at the NFL level. But Howell, I just see the ceiling, and I see someone who's closer to that ceiling. He's also younger than Willis. He's younger than most of the other quarterbacks at the top of this draft. So, and his first 2 years as starter, his tape is just incredible. He's got the best, and he has the best tape. He has the best tape at its best of any quarterback in this draft class. His best tape is better than Kenny Pickett's best tape. Right now, the thing is, I have to shake off some recency bias. Now, Pickett has shown marked improvement. But before this year, Kenny Pickett was not a better quarterback than Sam Howell. And no one would have put them in the same conversation. That doesn't mean they don't belong in the same conversation, but, it just so happened that Kenny Pickett's supporting cast hit its peak this year, and Howell's, he lost a bunch of guys last year. He lost the 4 best weapons out of his offense from last year. So, that some needs to be said about that. And Howell came in and started at North Carolina from day one. Or at the very least, should I say, Howell didn't have to run away and transfer to become a starter. And I hate to say that way about Willis, but Willis couldn't beat out Jarrett Stidham, although maybe he didn't have as much of a shot there. He couldn't beat out Bo Nix, even though he was there prior to Bo Nix being there. And he was basically even with another guy who transferred out of Auburn in Joey Gatewood, who couldn't win the starting job at Kentucky 2 straight years against different quarterbacks. Multiple different quarterbacks. So, I don't know. That plays a factor in it. It's there are tons of toolsy QBs. Drew Lock has all the tools in the world. No, he's not as fast as Willis, and I would say he's not as mobile as Howell. But he's got great mobility. He's got an amazing arm. And he had some crazy college production. Although, he kind of went up and down in college. Paxton Lynch had amazing measurables, had amazing, talent. I didn't love E.J. Manuel or Geno Smith. Those guys were talented. Geno was my number 1 quarterback that year, but I didn't even have a first-round grade on him. I didn't have a grade on him as high as any of... I don't think I have as high a grade on him as I do any of the top 6 quarterbacks in this draft. You gotta, when it comes to quarterbacks, tape is what matters. The combine doesn't matter. The reason a lot of us missed with Justin Herbert is we didn't think about how, maybe the coaching staff held Herbert back. And if there's one thing about Mario Cristobal, although, I don't think Cristobal was the only head coach. I almost want to say that Mark Helfrich was the head coach at the beginning for Herbert. Oregon didn't turn Herbert loose. Oregon didn't play to Herbert's strengths while he was there. And that kind of hid his power level, if you will. So, getting back to the, because I'm getting off on this because Seattle now is in a position of like, well, what are we doing at quarterback? They have the position of, they do have Locke. They have the ability to potentially go out and swing a trade for a Deshaun Watson. Now they have the ability, they have the ammunition to go, and draft a quarterback up top if they believe in one. They have the ability to just sit back and wait till next year. Because if you really want to look at things, I would suggest, if I'm Seattle, potentially even, you never want to punt on a year, and that's not what I mean here, but focus on developing young talent. Maybe trade down with someone who does want to move up in this class, in this draft, to get someone. Amass picks in future drafts or for like next year, and if you're really bad, you'll at the very least have or be close to where you can get, or maybe be the team who will have the pick of the top quarterbacks next year. Bryce Young, CJ Stroud. Otherwise, you'll have the ammunition to move up and potentially get one. Because if I'm looking around right now, there's a lot of teams that have just drafted young quarterbacks that I think could still be up at the top. Like the Lions, I think the Lions are going to be competitive next year. I still think they're going to have a losing record, but I think they're going to be a competitive team. They're probably going to have to move up if they're going to get their quarterback of the future, unless things just kind of go south. The Texans, we'll see. I would give Davis Mills the shot this year if I'm them. But that still probably puts them as a bottom 5 team. Especially if they don't go crazy or spend stupidly in free agency to try and be like overly competent or whatever. They do need to put Mills in a situation where he can show signs of improvement and like succeed, but a young quarterback can succeed while not winning a whole lot of games. I mean, or without putting your team in the playoffs. Sorry, I'm a little thirsty. So, on the other side, so I've talked about Seattle, and I mean, this is a huge get in terms of assets. I think they got pretty much as much as you can ask for. I mean, 4 top 60 picks, and they didn't have a first rounder this year. I can't remember if they had a second rounder this year either. They've made so many trades. I also have a feeling, I don't know how much longer Pete Carroll's going to be there either. But I mean, this is still crazy. I really thought it was more likely Aaron Rodgers would move than Russell Wilson. So, this just goes to show, we don't really know anything until it happens. Denver, giving up Noah Fant's huge. Giving up these picks is huge. But that's a really good roster, and if they'd had better quarterbacks, they'd have been a playoff team this year, probably, or like potentially. They've got great young talent. They got to sort out linebacker now, because like their top 3 linebackers are all free agents. I feel like they're going to bring back at least 1 or 2 of them. This is a good off-ball linebacker class. The thing is, they're going to have to hope, in my opinion, that like best case scenario now for the Broncos is that Chad Muma doesn't go in the second round, or Troy Anderson doesn't somehow go in the second round, potentially. But there are some good guys. I need to pull it up, or pull up like that draft board at linebacker. But maybe a Brandon Smith falls to the 3rd round out of Penn State. Maybe despite the workouts, like I said, with Troy Anderson, Chad Muma, and Channing Tindall, maybe one of those are available with their 3rd round pick. But, well, you know what? I just remembered. The Broncos got 2nd and 3rd round picks for Von Miller. So they had multiple seconds this year. I forgot about that. So they'll still have a 2nd round pick. They've still got picks. They did trade a 4th, but they got a 5th back. Or no. They trade a 5th and they got a 4th back. And they got Russell Wilson. I mean, this is a huge upgrade at quarterback. They've got Javonte Williams in-house at running back. I think Royce Freeman's still under contract for another year. They didn't have to give up any of their young receivers. And no, Cortland Sutton is not DK Metcalf, but he's a big-bodied receiver who can win 50-50 balls and play physically. And he runs a better route tree. Like DK Metcalf, and yes, he's improved, but Sutton's a better route runner. Jerry Jeudy is a better version of Tyler Lockett. Or is to me, potential-wise, a big upgrade on Tyler Lockett. And between some little minor injuries here and there and the quarterback play, I think Jeudy is a huge breakout candidate now this year. KJ Hamler, with his speed up the seam and his ability after the catch, who's that other guy who's been their kind of 3rd option, their slot guy? Was it Tim Patrick? Their other receiver. Sure, they traded Noah Fant. That's a loss. But Albert O is a really solid, receiving tight end. Great physical tools as well. And he put up some big numbers. He and Drew Lock played together in college as well. And their best seasons coincided with each other. And he had I'm trying to remember how many touchdowns he had that year. I want to say it was 13. He was just a dominant force, particularly in the red zone. But he was great up the seams too. And running corners and this is a deep tight end class in free agency and the draft. You can get competent play. Heck, they could bring Gerald Everett over because obviously the Seahawks aren't re-signing Everett now. Although Seattle has Everett and Dissly out. Dissly's goes back with Wilson as well. Either or Dissly could be a guy that they pick up. Will Dissly. And that defense has a bunch of great young pieces. You got Bradley Chubb. This is a deep edge rushing class. You use one of your day 2 picks on a guy Chubb's very physical and strong. What if you snag yourself a speed rusher? Just a pure athletic specimen in a Barno at the end of round 2. if he's there, or a Nick Bonito. Um, they've got options in the draft there. Um, and they've got some money to spend in free agency. Some of that just got taken up. But Wilson's cap hit's actually not as big as you think right now, although I'm sure there's an extension coming too. Denver's probably going to cut some people. Like they're going to have some cap casualties, I'm sure. But some of those guys, or they could have. There's some guys they have as upcoming free agents who could come back. They could go after Bryce Callahan. They could. I feel like they're going to move on from Kareem Jackson. But they have pieces. Losing Harris is kind of tough, but they've drafted and developed linemen there really well. I know this is a new front office, and new coaching staff, but I mean they were doing this before this coaching staff was even there. Or I mean the previous coaching staff was there. Or technically I guess Fangio was the defensive coordinator under John Fox. So anyway, I think Fangio was there briefly as a defensive coordinator before he became the head coach like years later. But anyway, this is big. So Denver has their franchise QB. Seattle now. We'll see what they do with their assets. But I think this kind of signals a little bit of a rebuild, but they're going to try and keep as much of the young talent they have already. Like, I don't think Metcalf's going anywhere. I wouldn't move him. I wouldn't move Lockett. I'd try and keep as much of this together and see like what we've got and try and figure out quarterback from there. This is big for the rest of the QB market also, though, because Aaron Rodgers is staying in Green Bay. We don't know the details of the contract yet, but this is apparently a market resetting deal. We could be talking $50 million a year or somewhere close to it. So that's big. Davante Adams has been franchised by the Packers, so that's $20 million. This probably means they're going to cut some of their bigger contracts, or they're going to try and restructure some guys or get guys back on cheaper deals. Some of those guys aren't going to accept that probably, but some guys who are in danger now, or I say in danger, some guys who are going to be having to make some business decisions are Preston Smith, Zadarius Smith, Billy Turner, we'll see if they're able to re-sign Robert Tonyan. Tonyan had that big 2020. He was injured last year, so he might be back under the radar. But that's a guy who had good chemistry with Rodgers. I'd try and keep him around. Marcus Valdez-Scantling's a free agent. They're going to let him go. They're going to let him walk. There's another player I'm trying to think of right now, or another vet that could be going. Devondre Campbell had a great All-Pro, has an All-Pro season, coming over on basically like a veteran minimum deal. He's going to be looking for a raise. Maybe the Packers give it to him. I'm not convinced of that. They have not really shelled out big on linebackers or like middle linebackers in a long time. The last like major investment I can remember them making, like that I would consider a major investment, would be maybe AJ Hawk. Not that they haven't re-signed some guys to veteran deals, but from a draft capital investment and then keeping him around on a second contract, like that was the last time I really remember them spending money. Like they've had some good middle linebackers, but one guy had a kind of a rough injury that kind of ended up kind of taking him out. I'm trying to remember because that would have been the early 2010s or so. Of course, they had what was it, Nick Collins, great safety, who like a neck injury, neutered his career like early. I mean, basically in like his mid-20s, he went from being like the best safety in the NFL to out of the league, or one of the best safeties in the NFL to just done. So, sorry, I didn't mute there. But Green Bay is bringing it back. And I mean, at this point, Green Bay has to still be in the top 3 contenders. They made the NFC Championship game each of the last 2 years. Or wait, sorry. No. They didn't make the NFC Championship game this year. That's my bad. They did lose in the divisional round to the Niners. Right. Pretty sure I'm right on that. Sorry, I've been so delving deep into prospect stuff, like forgetting like what happened 2 months ago. And I mean, it's just like, what's wrong with me? Or actually, a little less than 2 months ago. So, but this has been a team that's dominated through the regular season. Rodgers coming off of back-to-back MVPs. They've got talent. They've got the coaching staff. And criticize some of their drafting, because like some of their picks have really flopped. Like so far, DeGuara, tight end out of, I think it was Cincinnati, from 2020, third round pick. That didn't work out. Jay Sternberger, who I think was that 2019 now, that didn't really work out. Although some of that's injury stuff. And Tunyon, showing out in 2020. They had Randall Cobb last year. They brought him in, so that kind of stunted Amari Rodgers potentially doing anything out of the slot. But they have nailed some like other picks. Kevin King and Josh Jackson, Josh Jackson really hadn't done anything, unfortunately. Kevin King has started for them as a second-round pick. But they nailed, like, first-round picks like Eric Stokes. They nailed that pick this year, even though a lot of us thought that was a reach. Turned out to be a great compliment, even though Alexander missed a lot of the season, to Jair Alexander. Different style of corner. But the right kind of got to play opposite of Jair Alexander, who was another first-round pick they hit on. They hit on Savage. They hit on Rashawn Gary, who was, he was a boomer bust guy that I loved the tools. Didn't necessarily love the tape. Had questions about. He has developed. He really came on this year. And made, their pricier veteran edge guys, more expendable. Say what you will about Blake Martinez, that was a great draft pick. They've done a really good job of getting solid contributors at the, inside linebacker position on day 3 of drafts. Not like they've done a great job, and they've done a great job like finding capable players on the cheap in the veteran market. Look at what they just did with Devondre Campbell. And they've done a good job of drafting linemen, too, and developing those guys 4 years. Although I still question the Chris Myers pick last year. Like, even if he ends up being solid, he's never going to be as good as Creed Humphrey. Or as valuable as some other guys they could have picked with that pick. Just flat out. Like, he would have to turn into something that that I'm convinced he's not going to turn out to be, which is one of the greatest centers of all time, to justify, like, drafting him over Creed Humphrey. I just, like, that one still boggles my mind from last year's draft. But, I honestly think to some degree they were like, he's Ohio State. He understands this region a little better and probably will handle the temperatures better. Whatever. But Elton Jenkins, um, who they drafted a few years back out of Mississippi State, what a prospect that I loved in that draft. He's been everything I thought he could be. One of the best guards in the NFL already. And can play multiple positions. And they do a good job of drafting linemen on day 3 and developing them. And they've spent a bunch of picks on guys in day 3 that they're still developing. Some of those guys take several years to develop, for different reasons. So the Packers have done a good job of building teams. They've never been. You've got Rodgers and Adams. That's what's most important for them. And that, of course, has spill over into other teams. I talked about Houston now. Houston has the top quarterback now on the market, or who should be on the market. San Francisco now, for quarterback-needy teams, Jimmy G is now the second best. And if Deshaun Watson's legal stuff has you scared away, Jimmy G's now the top quarterback on the market. At least the trade market. Now, maybe you prefer Jameis in free agency, or you like the upside of someone like Marcus Mariota or Mitchell Trubisky. Which, by the way, Trubisky and Mariota are basically the same age. Mariota has, I think, 2 more years of NFL experience than Trubisky. And he was a better quarterback when he was a starter than Trubisky. Just seriously, if we're giving a veteran guy a chance, I've not understood the whole Trubisky thing. I get the idea of him as a great backup option for a team that doesn't want their offense to change too much from a very athletic quarterback. He's a great fit to back up Josh Allen. And QBs like that. But I don't care about trotting him out as a starter. I would rather have one of the quarterbacks in this year's draft, like the top quarterbacks, than Mitchell Trubisky at this point. I've seen enough. I've seen enough. So I think San Fran's going to get something decent for Jimmy G. And I'm going to get... Now, Washington has gone out and offered for Watson. But I really feel like Jimmy G is going to end up in Washington. Or Washington's going to draft one of the rooks at this point. Because I really think Houston's waiting for some just gangbusters offer for Watson. And I'm just worried, other than that Washington offer, if the Texans aren't interested in taking that, I don't know. I really don't know what better they're going to get, except maybe now from Seattle, or they're really hoping the Eagles decide they want to talk shop, and I'm not convinced that's going to happen either. So, I mean, that's just me. Some other news that we've got going around because of the franchise. Like I said, Davante Adams has been franchise tagged. Dalton Schultz, like I mentioned at the top of the show, Cowboys tagged him. And that's big. Because all I'd been hearing was that Randy Gregory was the priority this offseason. And I was reading earlier about some other stuff they've done. So Cowboys made a bunch of moves today. So if you're a Cowboys fan, or you're just interested in what the Cowboys are doing, you might want to tune in right here. So they restructured Dak Prescott's contract, which was always going to happen. When they signed his deal last year, they put 2 voidable years in it for that purpose. they really believe in Dak. They want Dak there long term. So this kind of stuff, this is all par for the course. And this is the kind of stuff the Saints were doing with Drew Brees. This is what a lot of teams are doing that have great quarterbacks to, deal with, those cap hits and free up cap space every year or every couple years. Zach Martin was supposed to count $20 million against the cap this year. I think Prescott, it was like $34.5 million or something like that, $35.5 million. So Martin's cap hit's going to come down. And he's one of the best guards in the NFL. So having him long term, that's always good. Hello, bot person. Thank you for commenting in my chat. Really helps the channel. So you have guys like, you have these restructures for Prescott and Martin, which are going to clear apparently significant cap space. Sorry, a little bit of a hangnail there. That was just driving me nuts. Because no, I don't buy my nails. So you've got Dak, you got Zach, their contracts, money moved around, freeing up space. They have franchise tag Dalton Schultz at $10.9 million. That's the tight end franchise tag number. So Njoku and Schultz are off the market, and I'd argue that's two of your four biggest tight ends off the market. The other two being Rob Gronkowski and Mike Gesicki. I need to check to see if the Dolphins franchised him, but I had a feeling they weren't going to. I'm a little shocked by Dalton Schultz getting franchised. I like Schultz a lot. I was kind of hoping that the Titans might get him in free agency, but he's a really dependable player. He had a big season this year. He's not 8 figures a year, good. He's not, should I say, he's not 8 million figures a year valuable to me. If I'm going over 10 million, I want an athletic freak. Like Noah Fant is a 10 million plus a year talent. David Njoku's a 10 million plus a year talent, the way he played this past season. And Cleveland had a deep tight end room this season. And they were paying Austin Hooper. Hooper's probably going to get cut. Or he very well could get cut. And if so, he's going to now be one of the top guys on the market, potentially. I'd argue I get why Gesicki's a top 10 guy, but he's more of one of those big slot matchup type guys. Flex him out. He's really a big wide receiver than a tight end. And I can't remember if Gesicki won his grievance or if that has been finalized to be classified as a receiver instead of a tight end for those purposes, but Gesicki, that probably hurt him, which if he's wanting to get to the open market, it helped him. But listing him as a wide receiver is not going to help his contract value. At all. But it would have deterred very much a franchise tagging. So, and I don't think he got tagged. So, if that was all he cared about, then Gambit paid off. Randy Gregory still is a free agent then. They can't tag two people. And there's a lot of hype around Gregory. Gregory, I think, seems to think he's a $20 million a year guy. I don't know. We'll see if the market says so. Because it almost makes me feel like he was asking more than the Cowboys are like, we really want to keep you around, but like, we've got our max offer. If someone beats it, someone beats it. If you don't get anything better on the open market, please come. It's like this offer's on the table. They have reached out to restructure some other guys. Like they haven't cut him yet. And they're not going to cut him until a contract is agreed with Michael Gallup, who's coming off a hip injury. But they're going to cut Amari Cooper as soon as they get pen to paper with Michael Gallup. Or potentially a replacement in free agency. Because they have until the 5th day of the league year, which is March 20th, to cut Amari Cooper. So really they have 4 days because they need to do it before the 20th. They have until that day for his full salary to become guaranteed. So they would free up like $16 million in space there. I believe they think they can get Gallup at less than $10 million a year. And maybe a little less than even that. But I think they think they can get him in the 7 figures a year range. So, if you can save, and depending on how they structure that deal, that'll free up, or that will take up, maybe half of that space. That leaves them with like $8 million. Let's say they're able to structure it where they end up with like $8 million left out of that Cooper money to spend after, say, re-signing Gallup or snagging someone else. But they would like it to be Gallup. Gallup has proven to be a really good number 2 receiver across from Cooper. A good number 3 with Lamb and Cooper. I think he's a free agent as well, but Cedric Wilson, former Boise State wideout, really stepped up this year when Gallup went down injured. Looked really good in the slot. They can get him back on the cheap. He knows the offense. He's got rapport with Dak Prescott. That would be valuable. This probably means they've offered a restructure, like a pay cut to Blake Jarwin, who's coming off a hip injury. Was Gallup a hip or ACL? No, I can't remember. Jarwin, I'm pretty certain it definitely was a hip injury. And so they're going to offer him a restructure. If they don't get it, he's gone. Because they franchise Schultz. I have a feeling that $10.9 million number for Schultz, if they work out a long-term deal, it's going to be under $10 million a year. I'd almost guarantee that. It's like, look, you're not getting $11 million a year from us. Now, he might not accept an extension, so he ends up playing on that. But that's what the Cowboys, I think, are going to try to do with Schultz. And then you've got Demarcus Lawrence, who apparently has already turned down a restructure of his deal. He'll count like $19 million, or I think, against the cap this year. And if we're just being honest, I mean, he's still a good player, but he hasn't been. He's. You could argue he's declined almost every year since he signed that big extension after his huge productive season. And I think if they had to choose between paying Gregory and keeping Lawrence, I think the Cowboys are going to pick paying Gregory, and they're just going to cut Lawrence. I'm not sure exactly how many or how much money that's going to save, but I think it would be over like $10 million or so. I'd need to look at it again, but they would then need to address, and in my opinion, they need to address edge in the draft anyway, regardless of who's there. Dorrance Armstrong is also a free agent, so he's going to be gone. Or they might get him back on a fairly cheap deal. We'll see. But I'm not But if I am a Cowboys fan, and all their safeties basically are free agents, they've got some linebackers free agents. Like, they've got some holes to fill, but they've got, like, the big pieces. They've got Parsons. And you don't want to make him... And, yes, he's a great... Like, he's shown to be a really productive edge rusher. His versatility and ability to rush from so many different places and cover and do everything, you don't want to just put him on the edge. You actually would be neutering his value. But this is a great draft for figuring out linebacker. This is a really great draft and free agency class if you're wanting to figure out safety. And they could bring some guys back. They could bring DeMonte KZ back. They could bring... Xavier Woods went and played a 1-year contract in Minnesota and looked really, really good. Maybe you try and bring him back in. If you want to go with a veteran option, like Anthony Harris, I believe, is a free agent again. I think he only signed a 1-year contract with the Eagles. Harris has been a really productive guy who teams did not bite on his uber productive, final season in Minnesota in free agency last year. And there could be some bigger names that you might be able to get at cheaper prices than their name and talent level. Although I would, in my opinion, when Landon Collins gets cut, I don't think I'd touch him. Not for the money he's probably going to ask and probably going to get from somebody. And I don't think Dallas needs to worry about corner. Maybe snag a cheap veteran option. And there could be several, like, you could get a Casey Hayward. Who I think is a free agent. Or could be if he's not right now, he could be a cap casualty in Las Vegas. But there are a number of those kind of guys on the market. But you've got Kelvin Joseph, who looked pretty stinking good as a rookie. And I think is a great match for Diggs on the other side. And people can say what they want about Diggs being boom or bust. Part of that is the scheme, and part of that is his ball hawking, But those interceptions provide a ton of value, flipping plays. It's his second year in the league. He can get better at kind of min-maxing there. And taking better chances and not getting beat, but having a better rangier safeties over the top would also help there. And this is a great draft for that. I was talking about yesterday, tons of speed. Guys like Daxton Hill, Louis Cine, Jaquan Brisker. Further down the board, guys like JT Woods. And the way so many teams are playing coverages now, really, corner safety designations don't super matter as long as guys are physical enough. So, I'm not super concerned. Like, a guy like Zavon McCollum that I talked about yesterday. Oh, goodness. A guy like Zavon McCollum, he very well could be or could play safety, depending on, like, your schemes. So, and Dax Hill can, really, you look at him, and I would say Cine, those guys but especially Hill, like, and if you watch his tape at Michigan, he was like a slot defender. But he played everything from safety to corner. Like, he played everything from, like, he played man, he played zone. But you draft, like, someone like that to play over the top of Joseph and Diggs, you're going to make life a lot easier in those scenarios. And you're going to it's going to help Diggs, be able to take more chances attacking the ball, which he is so good at doing. Those kind of corners are super valuable. Guys who can turn the ball over and give your offense shorter fields, or guys who can turn the ball over when the offense is in scoring position and keep points off the board. That's important. That is big time. And if you look at all the metrics, those interceptions are far more valuable than his blown plays. Far more valuable. Not to mention the way we grade coverage and like blown assignments and stuff like that anyway is kind of interesting. Like, there are a lot of guys that's like, oh man, they never get thrown. It's like, yeah, that's because the metrics don't always like really pick up like who actually gave up, yards in coverage. And I do feel like different schemes put players in better or worse positions metrics-wise. And the metrics don't differentiate that. Because sometimes it doesn't matter who the closest guy was. The closest guy might not have been the guy who was supposed to be the closest guy. And just because you gave up, a lot of, and just because you were the closest guy, and you were supposed to be the closest guy, sometimes receivers, or in those terms, closest defender can mean 3 yards away or right on a guy. And for different reasons. And depending on the receivers you're going up against. If you're playing against a higher percentage of like elite catch and traffic type, 50-50 ball winners, those catches are going to happen. If you're having to play against like the faster slate of receivers in another corner, you're more likely to get beat deep. That's just it. I'm not saying Diggs is the best corner in the NFL. I think some people have. I think it's ridiculous how polarizing how polarized the talk is about him. I like turnovers, so I love him. And I think he's a great cornerback because of that. But I don't think the Cowboys need to draft one. They've got young corners. They've got Jordan Lewis in the slot. I'd say take a veteran. They need to focus on the middle of their defense. I think they need to improve at defensive tackle. Is a big place which hopefully, their 20, who was their 2020 pick? Because if I remember correctly, they picked a D tackle in 2020, one of the top 2 guys. One of them went to Baltimore. And one of them went to... Did they get the A&M guy or the Oklahoma guy? Because you had... I think one of them was from A&M. His name's Matabuke. And then the other was Noah Gallimore out of Oklahoma. And they had immense physical potential. And one of them went to Baltimore. And I think it was Matabuke. And I think the Cowboys got Gallimore. They still can use an upgrade on the interior. So they need to focus on D-line and safety, in my opinion, in the draft, and offensive line depth further down the board. Some developmental guys there. But Cowboys are looking in good shape, and This is another thing I got into it with people. Cowboys fans, it is so funny to me, like, hearing all this stuff about Jerry Jones is the worst. He's so bad. I'm like, dude, look at Detroit and what their ownership group, the decisions they've made. Look at the Texans ownership group and what they've done to that team recently. I like the Khan family. I think they're cool people. So for the most part, like, I think Shad Khan's a really good dude. Jacksonville's been all over the map. Although I think Khan has, if you look at it, Khan has tried to make good decisions. And tried to get people tied to the area. Like, Khan's results have not been great. That doesn't mean like that his heart and that the logic behind his decisions was bad. Like, they have an ownership group that's invested in Jacksonville and investing in Jacksonville. So I think, I think some of the criticism there maybe is not unfounded, but, Jerry Jones has bought the Cowboys when they were going into rebuild. He just went full into the rebuild. He hired a awesome coach. He greenlit that guy's plan. They won 2 Super Bowls, and then they fell out. And you can say that's Jerry's fault, and that's true. It's Jerry's fault. They end up winning another Super Bowl after he hired Barry Switzer. You could say whatever about the Bill Parcells regime. They acquired Drew Bledsoe. They ended up drafting or picking up Tony Romo. The Wade Phillips era was solid. Like, people hate on that. Wade Phillips was a good coach. Wade Phillips' win-loss record as a coach, I think, says enough, in my opinion. He's not a bad coach, and he's an elite defensive mind. Jason Garrett's record was better than I thought it. Like, when I looked at it, I'm like, I didn't think Jason Garrett's record was going to be that good. No, they haven't won championships. There's a lot of teams that haven't won championships. Jerry Jones is heavily invested in that team. He's heavily invested in the area and building up the area there. I don't know, like, people just expect the moon and the stars. Like, yeah, people have faults. Oh my God, but at least you're not Detroit. At least you're not the Jets. Heck, look at where the Giants are. They won 2 Super Bowls in the span of 5 years, and they're in a worse spot, and they've been more poorly run and managed than the Cowboys the last decade. I mean, look at where the 49ers were. I mean, look at where they are now. They're back, but their ownership, like, Trent Baalke nearly burned the place to the ground. Jim Harbaugh left because he hated Baalke's guts, which Baalke is now in Jacksonville. See what happens there. I mean, and every management, like, I see people complain about the management of teams. The same people that won them Super Bowls. Yeah, Seattle was great. They regressed to the mean on just the ridiculous amount of picks they were hitting on. And, they nailed a 3rd-round quarterback draft pick that allowed them to move on from a veteran signing early. And they were able to, use that money to get free agents and make big, splashy moves with trades and stuff. And now, yeah, they've traded Russell Wilson. Things haven't gone amazing or whatever. But the win-loss record still has been really good. And now they're resetting again. John Schneider has done this before for the team. Howie Roseman won the Eagles the Super Bowl. Within 2 years, everybody's ready to, fire Howie Roseman again. Roseman is a really great talent evaluator. He's an aggressive move maker, and he's built great rosters. Just because quarterback didn't work out, part of the reason things didn't work out is Carson Wentz just kept getting hurt. And then there was some disagreement, like Doug Peterson, Wentz, the GM, the owner, nobody could get on the same page. There were multiple voices, and now it seems like voices are aligned. Plans are aligned. You know, everybody kind of ridiculed Andy Reid. I know I'm not, or some of this, you know, I'm getting into management, not just ownership, but Andy Reid was, you know, this guy who could get almost there, but he was always a failure until he won the Super Bowl. Now, everybody's talking about him like the offensive genius and quarterback developer that he's always been. The problem is, between Donovan McNabb, like once Donovan McNabb's career took the nosedive at the end, he didn't have elite quarterbacks to work with. He got the most anybody could out of Kevin Kolb. He got the best years anyone got out of Alex Smith. And look at what he's done with Patrick Mahomes. I mean, Reid was always a genius. Reid was always an awesome top of the mountain head coach. But sometimes, like, there were flaws to those Eagles teams. And there was a reason they only made it to one Super Bowl. And part of that was Donovan McNabb's. The big part they didn't win was Donovan McNabb's fault. Because he didn't like Terrell Owens. So, Cowboys fans want to rip Jerry Jones, whatever. Has he been perfect? No. Are there definite criticisms? Yes. For pretty much the entire time the Cowboys have been under Jerry Jones, except for about a 5-year window, they've had competent quarterback play from their starter when healthy. They had a brief period in the early 2000s where they were searching, but then they traded for Drew Bledsoe, and then they developed Tony Romo, who pushed Bledsoe out the door. And then they drafted Dak Prescott. Like, you know, and people can have some criticisms about Stephen Jones, too. Stephen Jones has done a great job with personnel. He's done a great job with his drafting. And even the best people screw up. Like, there's a running theme with the Patriots that they can't draft early round receivers under Bill Belichick. Guess what? They won a bunch of Super Bowls. You know, those receivers might have failed, but the receivers they traded for and the late round guys and undrafted guys that they developed were plenty enough. I mean, you know, the Buccaneers ownership group, there were a lot of people upset with the Bucs owners for years. And then all of a sudden everything's happy and good again. You know, the Bidwell family out in Arizona, for the most part, you know, everybody's just attributed a lot of the stuff out there to just luck. Like, a lot of people look at the Bidwells as some of the worst owners in the league. I mean, the Bengals were in the Super Bowl this year. Mike Brown is arguably, for a lot of people, maybe the league's worst owner from an investment standpoint in the team. Now, some of that's because that team's really all he's got. Kind of like the Raiders. The Bengals just don't have the big brand. The Bengals weren't located on the, you know, in the Bay Area or LA ever. They've been in Cincinnati. So, there are worse ownership groups. Heck, the Bills owners, you know, when the Pagulias bought the Bills, those were owners that had gotten, or that, I believe those were the same owners, the same family who had been the owners of the Bills when they went to 4 straight Super Bowls. But the Bills in the 2000s had sucked. And people had issues with the Pagulias up until recently. I mean, I don't know. When everything's going good, the owner's, the face of great leadership, whatever. And it's really easy to scapegoat owners. And if there's one criticism, if you want to say that Jerry wants a yes man head coach or someone who's just going to tell him what he wants to hear, wow, I just got country all of a sudden. I kind of like that, though. That's fair. And here's the thing. We basically know that Mike McCarthy lied to get that job. He basically admitted as much like within a couple weeks of getting the job. And to me, it proved this year that McCarthy learned nothing from falling out in Green Bay. That's the other thing. Mike McCarthy won a Super Bowl. And he's not a great coach. This is the other thing. Sometimes you don't need everything to be the best to win the Super Bowl. You just need enough boxes checked. Sometimes a great defense, a great defensive coordinator, great talent, an all-time QB, a really good front office who's great at evaluating talent, and a good support staff. You don't have to have the best head coach. You don't even have to have a good head coach. You just need one that's not the literal worst. I mean, the Ravens, Brian Billick, who is an offensive-minded head coach, mind you. This guy was the offensive coordinator at the time. Because I think they've been passed since in points scored, but the 98 Minnesota Vikings scored like 554 points, an NFL record. Just a downfield passing offense. He was the head coach of the Ravens, who had Trent Dilfer at quarterback, ran the ball all the time with Jamal Lewis, and played some of the best defense the NFL has ever seen to win a Super Bowl just 2 years later. And Brian Billick, after he left the Ravens, went into the media. He's never coached again. And in my opinion, it's a shame. Billick's a good coach. Billick was a good coach. Because he became the head coach and he said, this may be exactly the way I've played in the past. This may be my favorite way to do things. But this is what's going to win us games with what we got. That's a great coach. No one will tell me otherwise. Or yes, there was a reason he ended up out in Baltimore, but some of that I think was his own choice too. I mean, because to me, Billick's kind of the opposite of the Mike McCarthy. I think Billick really was a driving force behind why they won, whereas Mike McCarthy existed while they won. It's kind of weird to put it that way. But I don't know. People love to criticize owners. They love to criticize da-da-da-da-da. We love to criticize everything. But there are a lot of franchises out there who haven't won a Super Bowl. Heck, the Bengals had not won a playoff game since before I was born. Since before I was born. Since before the Cowboys won their 3 Super Bowls in the 90s. And winning is hard. The Steelers, after winning their last Super Bowl to end the 70s, they didn't play in a Super Bowl to the mid-90s. They didn't win a Super Bowl again until the 05-06 season? Yeah. Yes. So, I mean, I'm sorry I'm a little stammering here. And then the Steelers haven't been back to the Super Bowl now in It's been over a decade since Steelers have been to the Super Bowl. They went to like 3 in the span of like 6 seasons, 7 seasons. From the mid-2000s to like, I think it was my senior year of high school, so the 2010 season. So I think it was like 6 seasons. They went to 3, won 2 of them. Lost the third to the Packers. So, people can criticize like Jerry all they want. He's invested heavily in that team. I think his son Steven will probably be a better owner. I think he knows more about football than his dad. And I think he'll make better decisions. With that being said, sorry, I was getting food delivered. So, that being said, I just think that ownership, it's easy to criticize. Like, would the Cowboys have rather had Bud Adams as an owner? I'll wait. Like, name better owners. Name someone who would buy the team from Jerry Jones and do a better job. Nobody knows. Just be glad you got what you got. Just be glad you've had a team that's been competitive for most of the last 1, 2, 3, 4 decades. Well, wait. 2000, 2010, 10, 20. 3 decades, whatever. Because the Lions have never, like, let's just go down the list. The Vikings have never won a Super Bowl. And they haven't played for one since the 70s. The Falcons have never won a Super Bowl. They played for 1. No, sorry. They played for 2. They played for 2. My bad. Forgot about the one in the 90s. Or in 98. When they beat the Vikings in that overtime game. Because Gary Anderson decided to finally miss a field goal. The Colts went, like, the Indianapolis Colts have won 1 Super Bowl. They played in 2 since Super Bowl 5. Because they played in 3 and they played in 5. The Panthers, they've been to 1 Super Bowl and lost. Now, they've got a short existence, and their entire existence has been since, actually, they started after the Cowboys won their last Super Bowl, I think. Same with the Jaguars. Jaguars have never played for a Super Bowl. Look at the Browns. I mean, would you rather be the Browns? Or would you rather have, like, the Browns ownership groups? Would you rather have the Bengals owner? You think he's better? They don't even have an indoor practice facility. Everybody else does. Most colleges, most good college programs have those. Not the great ones, not the elite ones, the good ones. They don't even have like a full scouting department. Last time I checked. I mean, would you rather have had... I mean, I know the Rams won a Super Bowl while they were in St. Louis. But that lady was... I mean, I guess she was hands-off, whatever. But Jerry ain't moving your team. I don't know. It's just funny. And here's another team, Chiefs. The Chiefs went from 1970. They went from Super Bowl 4 to, what was it? 2 years ago. They went like 50 years without going to a Super Bowl. Never once did anyone say that their ownership, or should I say, at least in my lifetime, I never remember anyone saying anything bad about their ownership. You know, the only reason people talk about Jerry Jones is because he's so out there in front of everything, and he is so involved. My thing is, stop complaining. If you hate Jerry Jones that much, root for another team. But you can't, and you won't. So get over it. He's there. And you just won a bunch of football games this year. You have a great young quarterback, a bunch of great young talent, and you're complaining. That's why people hate Cowboys fans. And sorry for the rant, but this is why so much of the league, and I have a lot of friends who are Cowboys fans, and they're great. But there is a massive subset of Cowboys fans who, oh yeah, we're the best. This is the year, da 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 da. Like, y'all are all so hype. And y'all trash Jerry Jones. Guess what? He's the reason you're so hype. You're just too stupid to admit it. Now, I'm going to use that word. Those of you who are angry with Jones, but every year's your year, every year, everyone's underrating the Cowboys. You're saying that they're underrating the job Jerry Jones is doing. That Stephen Jones is doing. Not all Cowboys fans are stupid. You know, let me be very clear. But if you're going to go on a rant about Jerry Jones, but you're going to talk about how great the team is every year. And I know enough of you, so this isn't some kind of straw man. This caricature, I see it in real life everywhere. You don't get to complain. Your team's good. Your team's really good. And most of the NFL would love to have it. I would love to have that problem. Although I should say this, I am a Titans fan. Our ownership, whatever, like they made a really good GM hire, who made a really great coaching hire. You know, I love where the Titans are at. You know, honeymoon period with Tannehill's over. If Tannehill can get back more to like his 2019, 2020 self, you know, this next year, that'd be great. But I'm kind of looking for QB of the future right now. But you know, I like where the Titans are at. You know, and I do like our ownership situation better now that, or, you know, you never want to say like, glad so-and-so's dead. That's not what I mean here when it comes to Bud Adams. But I'm glad Bud Adams is no longer the owner. Because towards the end, like, he was flipping off fans or flipping off Buffalo fans, like, that's just classless. Like, you're an old dude. Like, whatever. Anyway, so that was a rant about Cowboys fans. Tomorrow we'll get into NFL Scouting Combine Part 2. I didn't get into the Richard Sherman stuff like I meant to today, so I guess I'll do that on the show tomorrow. But I've got dinner delivered. I am hungry, and I'm gonna go eat. So I hope y'all have a great rest of your Tuesday evening. I'll catch y'all later. Well, I guess I'll catch you tomorrow afternoon. And please follow me on Twitter, if you would, at HunterK13. The H and the K are capital. And you'll be notified. If you use Twitter, you'll be notified anytime I go live there. So, and please, if you like the show, hit subscribe. Hit the like button. Definitely helps the show. And hit that notification bell and turn it to all so you always know when I go live.